Hello, hello. Hi again. This is Kelly Sue. And in this video today, I am going to be sharing my entrepreneurial origin story, which I think is really important because it's not just like the origin story of how and why I started my businesses. It really is also my personal journey. It is my nervous system journey. It's my burnout journey. It is all of these things you know, in intertwined and how I run my business today and what you'll see if you watch other videos of, how I vet for clients and kind of um how I make decisions in my business. It really, the way it looks today, the spaciousness and ease and all of that, putting my nervous system first, is really was like bounced off of all of this like earlier experience of work and burnout, eventually learning I was a highly sensitive person, understanding that, and then starting to cultivate my world, my life, and my work with that lens, right? So, yeah, I feel like sharing a little bit of all of this background is just helpful context. And so I will start. So grab your beverage. I have mine, my little electrolyte and magnesium, chlorophyll, magic mixture here that I drink in the mornings after I work out. Um, and grab grab your beverage, a snack. You can also 2x me. I get it. I 2x people all the time. So if you don't know what that means, if I am speaking too slow or you want to speed it up or slow it down, you can click the little gear icon. I believe it's usually at the bottom right. And if you go to playback speed, you can choose to slow me down or speed me up. And you can also put on closed captions if you're one of those girls. I am too. So I speed up everybody and I put people on like usually 1.5. So let's start with my fun fact, which maybe some of you know and some of you don't, but I mention it here and there. But my fun fact is that I was a Catholic missionary nun in my 20s for almost 8 years. So there it is, if you didn't know it already. And I'm very open about it. On Instagram, I think I have a whole highlight reel of me talking about it or different posts when I've written things. It was a great experience and at the same time really marked me in a kind of permanent way in so many ways, my nervous system. And the reason why, so I'll just kind of go. Yeah, I was in there from age 22 to age 30. Full habit, religious name, the whole hoo-ha, right? It was great. It is definitely my party favorite fun fact. But at the same time, so you would think, oh, being a nun, that sounds like so idyllic and peaceful, and what a peaceful life, right? Well, anyone who was in there with me would know in the order where I was, they're called the servidoras in Spanish, or the servants of the Lord in English. They are a very active order. So they're a missionary order of nuns. So they're not like this cloistered type who you might have this idyllic kind of, oh, they live in a monastery and don't see people and pray all day type of archetype of a nun. It was not that kind of a nun. It was the kind of nun that is out there in the parish with the people, having events, having youth retreats, running the CCD program, visiting the sick. It was doing all the apostolic things that nuns do. Apostolic meaning like missionary, going out to the people, right? Um, and it was a very go, go, go type of life. There was a very strict schedule. Your day started, ended with the ring of a bell, and there was a strict schedule. You kind of were programmed to do something at every minute of the day. And that's not an exaggeration. So, and being a Virgo and a people pleaser and like an eldest daughter, I was really good at that. I was a really great nun. I made a really great nun. It was great. I was eventually, I was appointed a mother superior for a couple years. So it was like, I aced that program really well. And it also like killed my nervous system. So there's that. But so it was a very movido, well, very fast life, very quick paced in many ways. And so I always kind of say similar to what can happen to someone who has a lot of capacity in a corporate job in regular America happened to me there. They saw that I had a lot of capacity. I had a lot of gifts. I came from a great family, just like good upbringing. I was like very capable, very grounded. So they gave me leadership. They gave me a lot of responsibility, but they over delegated a lot and did not give me sufficient help or support in that. And so after so, long story short, I left after, yeah, about 7 years and change. And I would say probably 60 to 70% of my leaving was due to the extreme burnout that I experienced after probably the last 4 years when I was no longer in formation. Formation is like a easy little bubble the first 2 years that you're in there. You're like baby chicks. But then when they send you out into the mission, I was missioned again, for those of you who don't know, I was missioned to Spanish Harlem in New York, which my heart loves it today, but the just the apostolic life there, the demands of the position I was put in up there, it was just very demanding for me. And I still consider the people there my family today. We're still in touch. I love the families and children and youth who I met when I was in Harlem. Um, but yeah, I left due to extreme burnout. So when I came home, it was like this is fall of 2011. I had just turned 30, and my nervous system was so tanked. I mean, by the end of my last few weeks being a nun, I like wasn't smiling. I couldn't eat. I was just miserable. And I am not like that. If you know me, this is like my usual countenance. I'm usually in a pretty even keel, happy go lucky type of person. Not all the time, but my baseline is pretty high, I would say. And that having lived in that state of, it was basically chronic stress and dysregulation for many years, off and on. Um, it really just tanked my nervous system. I remember seeing a naturopath my mom recommended, me to go to, and she was just like, your adrenals are tanked, like on E and beyond. And I was like, I don't even know what that means, but yes, that too. So, um, yeah, it took some time. It took a long time, I think, to recover from that. And that experience, the convent was probably the most severe burnout experience that really, I feel like it like marked my biology. Even though I've healed from it a lot, um, I still feel like it marked my biology probably for the rest of my life. Because it was so intense and so go go go, and I'm an introvert, I mean, at heart. And so living in community in the beginning, it's like fun and great, but it's like at the end of the day you don't have personal space or free time. So I think a large part and a thread of through this is um spaciousness and freedom. Those are probably my like two pillars of values that I kind of came out of their meeting and is still what I value today as a business owner and as just a human. I need spaciousness in my schedule, whether that's work or just like life. I need a lot of white space and freedom to live my day how I want to, not according to a schedule. So, like how that looks as a virtual assistant, for example, I'm not on call. So, there are a lot of VAs out there who will be on call or have work certain business hours and such and such. That is not me. I don't promise that because my nervous system can't promise that. So, my clients know I will get the work done on time and that's it. They don't need to know anything else. If they want to reach out to me, they can message me. They know I might not be there or I might be working on someone else's stuff. And that's just how I operate. So, freedom and spaciousness, I think, really started back then as something I needed to like reclaim and hold on to for dear life and never lose it again. So, after the convent, so here, if you need to take a sip of your beverage, go for it. I do. Um, yeah, it's been a while since I told this story. I came home, lived with my mom, went through a lot of like years of reorienting back to being in the world. That's a, stories for another day. But my first job back in the world was, shocker, in a Catholic school. Was my wheelhouse. I taught Spanish first. I'm fluent in Spanish. I would say I'm still fluent in Spanish, even though I have no one anymore to speak it to. I can absolutely understand it fluently, and I can definitely conversationally get by probably with anyone to this day. But so and that is thanks to my time in Harlem, right? So, I mean, I had studied Spanish, but Harlem really locked it in for me. And so when I came home, yeah, I became a Spanish teacher, and then eventually it was Spanish and religion, very on brand for someone who had been a nun in a Spanish speaking community. Um, and I taught Spanish and religion in a Catholic school for 4 years, 3 or 4 years. I really don't remember. Um, and while that was great, it also eventually burnt me out. I was, it was hard. It was hard. I'm surprised that I even went right into it, but I was still kind of nun-ish. So being in front of kids and doing a class, that we had done that as nuns all the time. So it was still kind of in me to do that. But being a teacher is so demanding of your energy. Everyone's saying your name a million times a day, Miss Fitzharris, Miss Fitzharris. And it's like, they were great kids. I still, again, still friends with them, love them. They're all like in college and beyond now, and I'm cheering them on. And but it really burnt me out. And I remember the last summer, like I was so close. I was just like so on edge. It was like the last week of school that like one of the days I was driving to school crying, and I just pulled into like a Lowe's parking lot crying because I just could not go into school. Nothing against the children. My nervous system could not handle it anymore. And I turned right around and like drove to the shore and like asked my mom. My mom had like a friend who had a house there, and I was like, "Can I just go and stay there for the day? I was just a basket case, and I called in sick and the whole nine." And that was like my last. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I put in my time after that year of teaching, and then I got my next gig was in the food industry, which I'm also not unfamiliar with. I grew up working summers and breaks in a catering company, so the food industry is also familiar to me pre-convent. And I got a job in like a juice bar. It's like a juice and burrito bar, which also did not last more than 6 months. Shocker though, also I was like within a month, like they made me like a shift manager because I literally was working with like 20-year-olds, and I was like, 30 something, 34. I just needed like a transitional job, so I did that. But food is also highly demanding on the nervous system if you're serving people, and when it's crowded and rushed and all of this, right, on the high demand like meal times. And I had another moment at that juice bar where I think middle of lunchtime, I like ran out the back door. I went to find the closest tree I could find. I was like having like that feeling of flood and then shut down because it was like there was a line of people. It was like so much going on. It was just like I dreaded the like rush times whenever that would be during my shift. And no matter kind of what role I was on, if I was at the cash register or the juice bar or making the burritos or bringing it out, I definitely hated bringing it out to the people. Um, it was just too like overwhelming. And so I ran outside and like found a tree, and I was like, Devin, he was my manager at that time. Um, he was like the shop manager, so he was there during that time, and I was like, I think I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Like I'm just so I resigned from that. And then and yeah, that was like another nervous system. I was just like totally overwhelmed. And it was just like, Kelly, why do you keep doing this where you're like in front of people all day and like serving people live all day? Like first it was yeah, being a nun, which was a lot. And then it was like you're a teacher, and then it was like doing that. And it's hard because I am really good one-on-one. I can be really good even in small groups and at a front desk and all of that. But then I realized that that is not sustainable for me. I can do it in like short bursts, but I cannot do that like full time or, even all year. I just cannot. And so I still didn't learn that lesson. Then we're getting to the entrepreneurial part. So after the juice bar, I ended up moving out to Arizona. My dad and stepmom live out there. I was like, you know what? First, it was just to kind of take a break and see what opportunities might be out there. I also hadn't made a lot of friends in New Jersey post-convent. It was kind of like you know, I kind of wanted maybe a fresh start. And so I went out there. I'm also trying to be mindful of time. Um, And I landed what became a great job for me there. My main job while I was out there for 4 years was working at the Phoenix Center for the Arts. It's a nonprofit art center in the city of Phoenix. It was huge. We served thousands of students. There were dozens of types of art classes, visual and performing. It was like awesome. It was an awesome place back in its heyday when I was there. I don't know what it's like now, but met great people, made friends, all the things. And I was the front desk girl. That's how I call myself. But what I was hired for was the patron services manager. Just a fancy title for a front desk girl. And but it wasn't just a front desk girl. It was a lot. It was a lot. And if you've worked in nonprofits, you're hired for one hat, but then they're like, oh yeah, here's your closet of hats that you were also kind of hired for. And we're all wearing all the hats, right? So that was also great for a while. But all of these were full-time jobs, 40-hour week, full-time employee. I had to be on site because I was the front desk girl from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Like that was part of my job. But working virtually was not a thing. And so I would go in every day and I would be at the front desk or back in my office, depending on the situation. And as nonprofits are, they can sometimes be disorganized and a little chaotic, and a lot of people needing you, or just you because you're the warm body sitting up there, stuff comes to you, right? So again, shocker, after I guess that was 3 years, I ended up feeling again super burnt out, had the same feeling I did when going to school, where I dreaded it. I was scared. I was crying. I was riding my bike because in Phoenix, for the last like couple of years, I didn't own a car. I lived right there. I rode my bike to work every day. There's some great things about my gig in Phoenix. I loved being able to ride my bike to work and back and all that. Um, but it got really bad. My body started like telling me, like, you can't sustain this anymore. And so I resigned from the art center after 3 years, and they were lovely. They gave me a little party. I mean, I love them to this day. It was a great, great gig, and I am grateful for it. But I had to go because like my body was like, we cannot do this anymore, girl. So it was at that point when I was deciding to leave the art center, when I was like, you know what, at the art center, all of, the gifts and the things that I was doing felt very scattered. I was using them to serve everybody, right? I was serving all the students, I was serving the instructors, I was serving the marketing department, who I also supported. I was serving the people who would call on the phone, wanting information to pay for their classes. It's like all of my gifts were like very scattered. And I was like, what would be awesome if I could use all of my gifts to serve just one business owner? Like that would feel much more energetically contained and supportive for me, instead of being in an office where I'm exposed to everything that walks through that door and anyone who's leaving. It's like, just all the time. B, um, my energies would not be scattered. They would actually be funneled into someone's, single business. I was kind of thinking like solopreneur, or someone with a small business, where I could work from home using the same skill sets and supporting them. And it would just be a little more contained for me. So that was my dream. When I left the art center, I was like, I'm going to be a VA. Like I had understood the concept and seen people on YouTube talk about it and so that was kind of my first go at it that summer of 2019. And I created a website. I created a WordPress website, which if you know anything, that's kind of ambitious of someone who has no experience doing websites. But I followed a YouTube tutorial and it was successful. And that was my website until 2024. So I don't know what that is. I don't do math in my head, but you do the math. It was probably my website for the first 5 years. I was a VA and a pet sitter. So that's my other like pillar of what I do. And I did land some VA clients that summer. Not enough to be a full income, but I probably landed like three. I was trying to remember the other day. I think I landed three. I marketed myself in some local Facebook groups, and I think I got a referral from someone who knew me at the art center. And that was my first experience with it. It was also my first summer house and pet sitting. So I was doing those gigs. And then I also, to help support myself, got a very part-time job also as a front desk person. But I learned it was for a chiropractor who, it was just him. It was him. He had a very small practice, successful, but small, and only worked, I think, 3 days a week, part of the day. And so it was that type of schedule. So I think I worked 12 hours a week for him at the front desk. And that was very doable for me. And I did that for a year. I did that whole conglomerate of things for a year. Um, and I started to feel like I am never going back to full-time role. Like I just could not, and I have not. And simultaneously, I have not had a bout of burnout since then. So for me, and all along, I didn't really talk about being a highly sensitive person, but post-convent, um, somewhere along the line of my like self-discovery after that, I read the book, The Highly Sensitive Person, and that literally changed my life and changed my lens of how I see myself. And it was so validating for my experience and still is all of that. And so, quitting or resigning from quitting the art center, that was my last 9 to 5 full-time W-2 employee job. I would go on, well, I'll get back to that. But so since then, I have only ever done my own stuff, first as a contractor, now as an LLC like owner, and I've done part-time W-2 stuff. So, you know, somewhere in the realm of 12 to 25 hours a week type jobs. I will never go back to the 40-hour work week. Definitely not for anyone else. And I don't even do it for myself. I just cannot. And I think there are many of us who are not built to do that. So if you are someone who like me, who just time and time again, you had good intentions, you have gifts, you have skills, and you're being a teacher, or you're working at a juice bar, or you're doing the nonprofit thing, you're in this full-time position and you just crash after a certain amount of years, you're probably not meant to do the 9 to 5. And really that this needs to be normalized. And I hope, you know, I hope someday it isn't like an even higher level, but I don't think many of us are, especially women, with our hormones and our cycles and all of that. We are not the same like week 1 to week 3 or week 2 to week 4. We are just not the same. We don't have the same capacity. So, um, yeah, I also read and learned a lot about that, about the female hormone cycle and how that changes throughout the month. And that also was a huge game changer for me post-convent. So I would say highly sensitive person and learning about my cycle truly changed how I cultivate my life and ultimately my business decisions and stuff. So um but that wasn't it. So after that, I oh right, I'm just like having a ping. Let's take a beverage, shall we? Take a breather. I'm getting to the ramp up of the entrepreneurial journey part. If you've stayed this long, you're my people. Please leave like a comment or something and say how long you stayed till. I would love that. Um, so after, yeah, Phoenix, quit the art center, did gigs and the chiropractor for a year and felt good. And I was like, I'm not going back to a 9 to 5. I'm not looking for another job like that. I need to be creative and find other ways to bring in income. That is not that. So then COVID happened, and some of the pet sits I had lined up for like spring, summer of 2020 were already being canceled because, the whole lockdown, all that. So I was like, okay, great. Now I can't even pet sit. What ended up happening, I ended up returning back to New Jersey. I was kind of over Phoenix for myself for various reasons. It was a great gig though. I loved it out there. It's lovely. If you haven't gone to the Southwest, you must. But I returned to New Jersey and wasn't intending to look for a job right away. I didn't. I spent the summer relaxing with my mom and just kind of taking another breather and trying to discern what the heck am I going to do next? And what ended up happening was I was started to pet sit again there in New Jersey, getting people. I was marketing in local Facebook groups. This is my old stomping ground, right? This is where I grew up. And in one of the Facebook groups, I saw this like really poppy um, hiring ad from a woman who owned a therapy practice. And I was like, who is this girl? Like, I like the way she writes, how excited she is about her own practice, how excited she is about this role that she's hiring for. I was like, who this girl? And so I read it, and it was for the role of, I laugh thinking that I applied for this role today. I'm 45. This was probably 5 or 6 years ago. It was the role of an intake coordinator, virtual intake coordinator. So answering the phone for this therapy practice and hearing people who wanted to go to therapy, matching them with therapists, getting all their paperwork set up. I hate the phone. I literally hate the phone. I'm just one of those people who hates being on the phone. Like, if we have to, like, just a personal side note, my fiance and I were like wedding planning, and if anything involves the phone, I'm like, can you please call them? I've tried to email, or they're not gonna. Can you do the phone call? Because I hate the phone. Anyway, I applied for this role mainly on vibes. This woman and the practice, I of course vetted the practice. I looked it up. They look great. It was mostly women, if not all women, therapists. I was like, these ladies are cool. Like, I like them, and I'd be happy to like do a thing for them. And it was only part-time. It was only 25 hours a week. I was like, I can do that. Oh, my camera just did a weird thing. Anyway, um, I applied, got the job. And so by Christmas of like 2020, I was the intake coordinator at this therapy practice. Thanks be to God, that did not last longer than a year. It was great. But um, I hated being on the phone so much. That didn't take long. And so I was very happy when the business owner, who, fast forward, she's still my client today, right? So I'm still with this person. So that vibe thing was real. um, she's just not my boss anymore. She's my client. So after the 1 year of being the intake coordinator and on the phone, she like taps me, metaphorically, and is like, "Hey, Kelly Sue, would you be interested in being my executive assistant? I'm opening this other business that's more like consulting and training therapists, and I could really use like a right hand person for that. And we'll hire another intake coordinator." And I was like, yes, I want to do that, please. So that decision was my last, well, now I'm 2 years into this, but that decision was 2 years and change, maybe. I can't even remember. I have to go back, but 2, 3 years of being her executive assistant in both businesses, plus a third one that she opened while I was there, another type of training with another therapist. So she had like 3 active LLCs going on when I was her EA. And that was also still only part-time. So I was doing that 25 hours a week, and I was house and pet sitting. And I have these other offerings. I do like readings and coaching here and there. Those are sprinkled in. So that's what I'm doing. And being her EA was so huge for my VA game, right? As you can imagine, being behind the scenes of someone running three businesses, having employees, you just, there is no other better training ground, truly. And while I didn't know it at the time, in the beginning, I was content to just stick around and be um, an EA and see how it went. I wasn't like, oh, I'm doing this as training to be my own boss later someday and go back to being a VA. Um, but eventually it just landed that way because what ended up happening, I mean, it ended up that way. I didn't want to be, firstly, I didn't want to be having to put in a certain amount of hours. It's that freedom thing. Even though I loved her and I loved the company and the business, I still felt because I was a W-2 and I had to kind of follow a contract essentially. In the beginning, it was 25 hours and then it was 20. Um, I still felt like a little chained in a way I didn't want to feel chained. And so I was like, I need my freedom. And being an EA is very consuming. And I didn't really want that responsibility. This is another piece and springboard from being my role as a nun. Um, because I had so much responsibility there. I kind of have a little bit of responsibility aversion. I don't want to be in charge of big, important things ever again. And so she has big, important things, right? She has three very large, impactful businesses. And so being her EA held a lot of responsibility. And I was feeling that I did not want to be that person for her moving forward. She is someone who is always going to be growing. She's essentially growing an empire of and I say that like lightly, but she wants to grow and expand and grow and expand. And I felt that I wasn't the right person to continue to be her main right-hand person as she did that. Um, and that was true. And so, but that doesn't mean I'm not still a part of her team and she doesn't trust me. She trusts me a lot. And so when I told her I wanted to, that I had kind of started to get contract with other people and I was doing some VA gig work on the side from being her EA. And that eventually, once I had enough of my VA clients, I had two kind of in the pot already. I was ready to kind of pull out of this EA position. Um, and she wanted to hire me back just for less hours. And I was totally down for that. And I kind of assumed that that might happen because I had just been her main person for so long. And it has been that way now. It's been now a year and a half, and I've been a contractor to her, still holding a good amount of the roles and things that I did before, but not to the extent that like I was when I was her EA. And that feels so much better to my nervous system because ultimately I don't want to be responsible for anyone else's business. I can carry out projects, execute things, like I can give my perspective on things, lots of things. But the level of responsibility an EA can have and hold, and it's almost like you're their second brain. And I do not, I have enough going on in my brain. I do not want to be anyone's second brain. No, absolutely not. So, and I love her to pieces. Um, and so Yes. So then I had two VA clients. Then she turned around and hired me back. So then I had three. And then I was off to the races. I mean, then it was like one of my VA clients referred me to another, had four. And then even in between there, people who I knew found me for project work. I don't know, someone else found my website from like the Netherlands and also hired me for her website and like projects and stuff. So something was happening. I was getting work as a VA and I was like, after I left her as an EA, I was like, I don't ever want to be a W-2 again, knock on wood, but I hope and pray and trust that I can continue to be my own like boss. And continue finding ways to offer my gifts and skills, in the marketplace of my own accord and not have to be an employee. And I get it. There's perks to being an employee. There's a steadiness, there's a comfort. And I was in that a lot, and I appreciated that when I was in that. And then it's like I was in it too long and it became too uncomfortable. And needed to get out and like do my own thing and have things be on my terms, which they are now. But that's not to say, as an entrepreneur, you still have to negotiate things with your clients. And you still might have to give a little here and there, but it's so much better now. I just feel like I'm not on call to anybody, but they also know I'm going to do darn good work for them if they've hired me, whether as a cat sitter or as a VA or anything else. And they learn to trust me because I do keep showing up and doing good work and being grounded and asking them how they are. Just like this, sitting here like this across the computer screen. This is how it goes. And so, yeah, that's my entrepreneurial slash burnout slash nervous system story. So everything I do today with regards to how I vet who's coming into my world as a client of any kind, it really all harkens back to those burnout stories and my nervous system. It's my nervous system vetting. Okay, is this person going to like set off alarms if you work with them? Or do they feel like a warm cup of coffee or tea or whatever is your favorite warm beverage and like a cozy blanket? Or at least close enough to that, you know? Yeah, so I'm a person who I need like low stimulation around most of the time, to function really well. Whereas, you have other types of people who need the high, I never understood. I worked with someone at the art center who she was always like, her like office was like siloed away, like on the third floor or something. And she was so sad about it. And I was like, I'll switch with you. Like, let me be the monk up there. But she would come down and work in this like shared office space. She's like, I just need to be around the buzz and the people and it just helps me. And I'm like, I did not understand. And now I do because I've grown and worked and experienced other people and heard about other experiences, ADHD people. And 3 of the 4 of my clients right now are self-proclaimed ADHDers, and they thrive on the buzz and the stimulation. And for me, it's like if there's literally like a modem noise, I'm like, how do I turn it off? It's like I can't get it out of my head. So I need low stimulation, and I want to be able to choose if we're going to up that ante. So if you stayed around, thank you. I do feel like I just had like a chat with a friend. And I feel like if you have stayed around, you will then also have this lens to look through when you're watching like my other videos and be like, right, remember where she came from. This is where I came from. So yeah, I'd love to hear if any of this resonates with you. If you are someone who, has burnt out from traditional work type roles and schedules numerous times, or, you know, came to learn you're a highly sensitive person later in life and it like was a total game changer. Um, or if you're like doing the thing like, as a VA, I don't work 40 hours as a VA. I work like 20 and I pet sit and do other things. So, are you doing that like juggle to kind of keep everything going? I don't think I could do anything for 40 hours a week, I really am like shocked that people do that, and we're all built differently. So kudos to them to be able to do that for their whole lifetime. But, even things I like to do, I don't think I'd want to do for 40 hours a week. But that's just me. All right, I'm going to end it here, friends. Thanks so much for being here.